If you feel like people aren't paying attention to your content, or even if they are paying attention to it, they just don't seem to resonate with your content, I can almost guarantee you, you are not including or are intentional with the identities you're using inside of your messaging and content. Being aware of this can change everything, and that's exactly what we're talking about inside of this episode. So if that interests you, well, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. And today we are talking about the power of identity. Identity, well, there's three things that I say always goes into really effective messaging. It's beliefs, it's core values, and identity. But I love identity because it's so easy to use and it's so easy to create, and it's incredibly powerful. Now I'm going to paint this picture for you just to show you the power of identity and how much control, I don't know if control is the right word, but let's use power, how much power it has over your everyday life. I want you to imagine your top three best friends. And I want you to imagine them right now, your top three best friends. Who are they? What are their names? Visualize who they are. And now I want you to look at them. And these are, when I say top three best friends, these are the people that you spend the most amount of time with. Like you're just like, hey, I have free time to go to lunch today. Who am I going to call? Like, who are you going to call? Who are those top three people? Now I want you to list why they are your top three friends. Like, why are they your top three friends? What do you guys have in common? Just think about that for a second. Now I'm willing to bet that the things you have in common most likely are identities. Yes, there might be core values. Yes, there are probably beliefs as well, kind of mixed in there. But I'm willing to bet that the strongest relationships you have with your friends, the top three people that you listed in your head, the top three of them, I'm willing to bet that you share one of your strongest identities with one of their strongest identities. Now, if I was to list out your identities or have you list your top 5 identities. So for me, I'm just going to list mine out so you understand what an identity is in case you may not be clear or understand totally what that is. For me, top identity would be like family man, entrepreneur, husband, businessman, successful, mountain biker, endurance athlete. Those are all identities, right? They all describe a type of person that I would classify myself as. But one of my top ones is parent. Like, that is one of my strongest identities, is parent. And when I look around at the people that I spend the most amount of time with outside of business, they generally are parents because we share the strongest identity. Now, the people I hang out with the most are either parents or entrepreneurs. So my top friends, the people that I spend the most amount of time with, usually have the identity of entrepreneur or business wrapped up in them somewhere, or they have parent as one. And I'm willing to bet it's the same thing with you and your friends. The people that you spend the most amount of time with, that you're the closest with, you likely, and again, this isn't 100%, but I'm willing to bet it's pretty dang high, that most of the people you spend the most amount of time with, or you enjoy spending the most amount of time with, are the ones that share one of your strongest or most important identities. Now, if we're choosing friends based off of identity, why are we not doing the same thing with our audience? If you know that humans form connections and they really say, I really resonate with this person and connect with this person and love this person and want to spend time with this person because we have a shared identity. Of course, most people aren't going to look at that and go, oh yeah, we have a shared identity. I'm going to spend time with them. No, it's a subconscious thing. Subconsciously, you're just drawn to the people that are most like you. The identities. Why? Because you can have deeper conversations. They get you. They understand you. They validate your identity. All of that stuff. It's a connection point. So this is why identity is so important. But the problem is most entrepreneurs never incorporate this into their business. And we're going to talk about different ways you can do this, like different ways of your brand becoming someone's identity. You creating identities within your brand that people can self-identify as. But I want you to realize that one of the ways that you can add value in someone's life, besides giving them more information, is literally reinforcing their identity. Making them feel good, making them know they're accepted for who they are, they can thrive because of who they are. And there's a couple steps I want to take you guys through when it comes to identity. And the main things I'm going to cover, just so you're aware, is how do we make our brand a part of someone's identity? And then how do we use this inside of our marketing? How do we use identity inside of our marketing? But I want to take us a step further so you guys fully understand this. Reinforcing someone's identity can also help create stronger behaviors. And what I mean by that is there's usually behaviors attached to identities. Entrepreneur, the behavior of risk taker, critical thinker, not going with the status quo, rebel. Those are all could be identities, but those are also behaviors associated with a certain identity. So if we start reinforcing people's behaviors with our messaging that are attached to an identity, we start to make people feel really good and we start to connect with them because of those identities. So for example, if I knew that I wanted to attract entrepreneurs, I could start using the word entrepreneur inside of my messaging, inside of my marketing. But I can also incorporate behaviors associated to the entrepreneur that I know a lot of people would resonate with. Again, if I said, we entrepreneurs, we are the risk takers. We are the change makers. We're out there creating change. Those are all behaviors. Change makers, we're out there to create change. Rebels, screw the 9 to 5, going against the status quo. Those are all behaviors that a typical entrepreneur likely accepts. So if we can reinforce also and identify behaviors that stem down from the identities of the people we want to attract, we start to go a little bit deeper with everything. But the reason why this is valuable, because a lot of people look at this and go like, well, I could just say this, and isn't that manipulative, Brandon, to be able to like just say these words in order to attract people? It's like, no, you're not going to say things that you don't believe in order to attract an audience, because that's inauthentic. But if you can identify and are intentional with, I'm going to say this instead of this, they might mean the same thing, but this one has a little bit more powerful because this is a behavior of an entrepreneur, then I'm going to do it. But the way I look at it is it's also a way to add value into someone's life without having to give them information. And there was a study done, and I'm probably, well, no, I don't know. I don't want to plant the idea in my head, but I may mispronounce their name. Bass, Veerplankton, and Jai Su from the UK had run a study that showed us that we can actually create higher levels of self-esteem in our audience by reinforcing behaviors attached to an identity. And one of the examples they use, and I'm going to give you the same example, is when it comes to smoking. Obviously, it's pretty well known that smoking can cause a lot of health problems. And there might be people that are, addicted to smoking who can't stop. And they have this idea of, smoking's bad and I'm going to have all these problems, but I can't stop. And it's going to create a lot of internal confusion and harm and bad feeling inside of them, right? Because they know it's bad and they don't want to do it anymore. But the example they gave was that if someone had an identity of being masculine, if there was someone out there who's like, I'm very masculine, I'm a man's man, I'm just the masculine dude, but they perceived smoking as masculine, the act or the behavior of smoking would reinforce their identity. And when their behaviors and their actions reinforce their identity, it actually produces a higher level of self-esteem because they are doing things that reinforce who they are versus doing things of who they aren't. So when we go back to the smoking example, when someone views themselves as healthy and they're addicted to smoking, their behavior keeps showing them that they're smoking, there's a mismatch of behavior, their perceived behavior to their identity, and that causes internal confusion, torment, pain. But in the same light, if someone viewed smoking, interpreted smoking as masculine, and one of their identities was man's man or had a lot of masculinity attached to it, their behavior reinforced the identity, and it actually gave them more self-esteem because they were doing everything in alignment of who they believed to be. Now, the reason why this is so important for us is that if you know reinforcing behaviors and identities can bring more self-esteem to people, you start to realize, well, I can actually create value in people's lives by giving them more self-esteem, more confidence. So there's a ton of ways to do that, but I don't think a lot of people in our space and in our industry realize that, look, if your messaging, if your connection-based videos, of all the these stands that you take, if you start to incorporate behaviors that you know are attached to an identity and you know your audience is doing those behaviors, well, you can actually create a higher level of self-esteem. And you know what happens when you create a higher level of self-esteem inside of your audience? They come back for more of that. They come back to you time and time again. So the reason why I share this is because identity is an incredibly powerful thing to use if you know what you're doing. And there's two ways that I want to talk about and how we can do this. It can add value in a ton of different ways. You can use it in your marketing and your messaging to make people feel good. But when we know the power of identity and you understand that, the next step of that is realizing you can actually create identities that people take on as well. Meaning you control the identity that they take on. So there's two ways to do this. Number one is your brand can become someone's identity. And I think I heard it from Russell Brunson first, is when he said, when your brand becomes someone's identity, you have loyalty for life. And I think ClickFunnels is a great example of a brand where people, they've created an identity called the Funnel Hacker. They have t-shirts called Funnel Hacker. I am a funnel hacker. I'm going to Funnel Hacker Live. It has become a part of their identity. Inside of our own brand, with our students, they call themselves 4Xers. And they label themselves as a 4Xer. They say things like, hey, they're 4Xers. So there's a couple ways in which you can do this, because really, if you want to create a loyal brand, you want to create some kind of identity around the brand that they start to take on. And this is done a couple different ways. Number one is just create a name and just use it. Hey, 4Xers, John Lee Dumas talks about Fire Nation. Hey, Fire Nation. And I think he calls everyone fire starters or something like that. But the more people listen and they become a part of as the more people listen and they become a repeat listener, the more the identity that you keep saying to them starts to be implemented or implanted into their head. And if they really like what you do, like what you stand for, you reinforce their behaviors, they will actually start to take on that identity. So for us, we have 4Xers inside of our program. That actually happened by accident. That wasn't something I intended to happen or was intentional about, but it did happen. And we also have new generation entrepreneur inside of our brand as well. Like, you are a new generation entrepreneur. If you're a person who stands up for what you believe in, you shift people's perspective, you add value in different ways, you are a new gen entrepreneur. That's what we stand for. So the first thing you want to do is create a name, and you want to incorporate that into your content and into your marketing. Call them those things. Hey, Fire Nation. Hey, 4Xers. What's up, funnel hackers? Whatever. You start your content, your podcast, your episodes that way. It starts to come on. Now, the next level to that, if you really want your brand to become someone's identity, is you have to be clear on the actions and the behaviors of what that identity does. Like we said earlier, if the behaviors people do match the identity, it creates a higher level of self-esteem. So for example, if Russell Brunson starts talking about, here's what a funnel hacker does, and this is what they do, and that's the thing that those people do, and that's the thing they believe, you're reinforcing the behavior that's attached to the identity. Therefore, you create higher levels of self-esteem. Oh my God, I'm doing that. I am the funnel hacker. I'm totally the funnel hacker. Wow, I feel really good, right? Or this is what the 4Xer does. Here's the behaviors of the 4Xer. Here's the actions the 4Xer takes. I am a 4Xer. They feel good in what they're doing. But you don't want to go too far with this, because if you start talking about behaviors they're not doing, they start going like, oh my God, I'm not a 4Xer yet. I'm not living up to the 4Xer code, or the funnel hacker code. I'm not quite there yet. You create more chaos inside of their internal state. So actions and behaviors. The next one is thoughts. Here's what a 4Xer thinks. This is what we do. This is what we stand for. You kind of set that theme. And then that's the next thing with beliefs. Here's what we believe in. Like with 4Xers, for example, we believe in ending suffering. We believe in shifting perspective to end suffering. That's a belief that we have. We have a belief that the status quo, the things that society tells us to do, usually causes more suffering than good, right? The actions and the behaviors that we have as a 4Xer, we stand up for what we believe in. We want to end suffering. We don't want to do all how-to content and blend in. We want to go against the status quo. Those are all behaviors. Those are all beliefs. And I'm very clear with that. With our students, that is one of the reasons why they start to label themselves as 4Xers, because the beliefs that we have, the beliefs that I set, the behaviors and the actions that I set, all align with the identity of 4Xer. So if you want to start to create your brand as someone's identity, number one, you have to come up with the name. Number two, you have to use the name. But if you want to go even deeper and not just use it, but you have to continuously use it. Then if you want to go deeper, get clear on the behaviors that that identity has and get clear on the thoughts and the beliefs that that audience has or that identity has. And these aren't beliefs that you necessarily have. They're beliefs that you want your audience to have, like things that you know they're going to rally behind, things you know that they're going to stand for, okay? So that's the first way in which we can use identity. If we can get our brand to become someone's identity, you have a loyal following. And the way we do that is come up with a name, use it continuously, understand the behaviors and talk about them, the thoughts, and as well as the beliefs, okay? So that's number one. Now, the part that I really wanted to talk about is how do we use this in marketing on a different level and in a different way. And I want to talk about avatars because I believe the way that avatars have been taught for a long period of time is just a little bit backwards. The way that most of us has been taught to talk about avatars inside of our space is to create an illusion. You basically sit down, you write a piece of paper, and you answer a bunch of questions. My ICA, my ideal client avatar. And you start writing it out. Who are they? Well, their name is John or Susan or whatever. They work 9 to 5 in a corporate job. They have 2 kids and they make $75,000 a year and they have a glass of wine at night. And you're just making someone up. This usually isn't a real person. So the way most people go about creating avatars is they just create an illusion. It's someone that doesn't exist. And how on earth are you supposed to communicate and create messaging to someone, to your audience, when you're literally trying to visualize someone that doesn't exist? Well, what happens to most people is you get very generalized. Are you overwhelmed? Are you just busy and not happy being in your 9 to 5? Like just very generalized copy, very generalized messaging, very generalized communication. And that's where most people get stuck, is you start communicating to a very fake person and then you create an illusion. Now, my question to you is, how on earth are you supposed to get specific when you are trying to communicate to an illusion, to a fake person? You start making up the specifics, right? So when I ask you, who's your struggling avatar or who's your client, ideal client, what's the avatar? And you start saying, oh, it's John and he works corporate 9 to 5 and he has a glass of wine at night and he has 2 kids. And I say, okay, great. What's the specific thing that he's doing what's the specific thing he's doing that's keeping him trapped in his job? Or no, sorry, what's the specific thing he's doing to try to break out of his job? He's go, well, he's starting an online business. Okay, great. That's not very specific. There's 1.5 million people trying to like start an online business on the side, or you might say he's doing a side hustle. Okay, great. Like 1 million people are doing a side hustle. But let's imagine for a second that John was an old version of you. Let's imagine you were the person who was stuck in that 9 to 5. And I re-ask the question, what is John doing to try to break out of his job? The answer changes. Because you're not trying to imagine John, you're just tapping into your past history. So what did you do? Well, I worked in this is really me, this is what I try to do. I worked in the garage at night, so I'd work 9 to 5, hating my job, feeling like this pit in the bottom of my stomach when I would go into work. And then the second I got home, I was really excited, and I would just go straight to the garage and I would start working on websites and learning how to code. And I was gaining a lot of experience, but I was working on AdSense and I was doing all of this stuff, right? My communication style completely shifted. I was very specific on what I was doing, the feelings that I had, the thoughts that I had, the desires that I had. But I only was able to do that because I looked at an older version of myself instead of a fake person that I had made up in my head. So what I'm saying is when you create avatars, if you have the opportunity for yourself, an older version of yourself to be the avatar, that's what you want to tap into. So most of us, if we have a service or we have a program or we have a coaching program or something like that, or a course, we are likely helping people go through some kind of transformation, and it's likely a transformation we have gone through ourselves. So instead of making something up, what I want you to do is to make an older version of yourself your avatar. So when I look at messaging and I look at content, and I look at the mistakes that I made and the feelings that I had, I'm literally tapping into a version of Brandon from 5 to 10 years ago. What were the thoughts? What were the feelings? And that's why you hear me use language like, honestly, I was posting every day and not getting any traction. And I just wanted to climb to the top of a mountain and yell, I can help you, universe, I can help people. Why aren't you letting me help people? That's how I felt. That's an actual thought that went through my head. When I use that in copy and I use that in language and I use that in communication and marketing and messaging, it hits people on a deeper level because it's very specific. But the only way I was able to get there is to look at an older version of myself. Now, however, I know a lot of listeners, you may not be going through or teaching people to go through a transformation you went through yourself. Maybe you're a doctor, right? And you're helping people with autoimmune diseases, even though you may have never had an autoimmune disease. That's okay. The easy way around this is instead of making up a fake person, just go to the client that you like working with the most and have conversations with them. What specifically are you feeling? What metaphors do you use? What things are you actually doing? What were you doing before this? Were you Googling? What books were you reading? All of those things are great things to ask so you have that specific messaging ammo to go to battle with when you go to market, right? Now, the reason why I get bringing this up is because that older version of you, that struggling avatar, was what I like to call it. We can actually create an identity around this. Now, when it comes to avatars, most people teach you to create one avatar, which is the person you want to serve. I want you to not only create that person, I want it to be an older version of you if possible, but I also want you to create a second one called the Future Pace Hero. Now, what we do is we create two avatars. This is what I call the struggling avatar, which is the ideal audience that you can help. And then there's the Future Paced Hero, which is the avatar they want to become, which should be you, right? If you went through the transformation, who are you now? Who do they want to become? Or if, again, that doctor scenario, who is the client they want to become? And you're going to give each of those a name. So you're going to give your struggling avatar a name, and you're going to give your Future Paced Hero a name. So for me, I have the unheard entrepreneur. That's my struggling avatar. You are the unheard entrepreneur. And I have the Future Paced Hero, who is the new generation entrepreneur. Now, what I just did in that moment is I actually created two different identities within my brand. The struggling avatar is one identity. When people hear me talk about the unheard entrepreneur, and they hear that the specific results that I'm talking about, the specific thoughts, the specific feelings, problems, things you're experiencing, things that you're doing, and they go, oh my gosh, that's me. They automatically associate, I am the unheard entrepreneur. They literally will take on the identity of the unheard entrepreneur. And I know it's effective and I know it works because not almost every student, but a lot of our students, when they join the program, they tell me, I realized I was the unheard entrepreneur. They're literally saying, I am or I was the unheard entrepreneur. They are literally self-diagnosing, I am this. Basically, they're telling me this has become one of the identities and I didn't want that identity anymore. So on the other end of that, when we have the Future Paced Hero and we start talking about the new generation entrepreneur, the things that the new generation entrepreneur gets to experience, the thoughts they now have, the behaviors that they now have, the experiences they now have, the results they now have, everything that the struggling avatar desires, it becomes a conversation of, I realized I was the struggling avatar. I didn't want to be the struggling avatar anymore. I'm joining, or I'm following you, or I'm part of your community, or I love listening to your content because I want to become the new generation entrepreneur, the future-paced hero. So we literally hear, hey, I joined the program. I'm ready to become the new generation entrepreneur. I realized I was the unheard entrepreneur and I don't want to be there anymore. I'm ready to become that new generation entrepreneur. Let's do this. So what they're saying is, I realized I had this identity and I want to become this identity. And when you start to incorporate these things into your messaging, into your marketing, into your brand, and people sit inside your messaging ecosystem, it starts to create demand for wanting to change. And the way it's positioned, because it's a part of your ecosystem, part of your brand, what starts to happen is you become the solution that's going to make that transformation happen. Now, obviously, we can go a little bit deeper with this. I can talk about how we can create that demand a little bit more, but that is another way in which you can use identity inside your brand. So there's two things we kind of talked about. Number one is your brand can literally become someone's identity, but we can also create demand gaps by creating different identities within your brand ecosystem, within your messaging ecosystem. And it's very simple. Struggling avatar, who is an older version of you, or one of the best clients that you love working with. And then the future-paced hero is who they want to become. And you just give them names, and that will create a demand gap within your brand. Now, a couple things, if we want to go just a little bit deeper with this, is if you start talking about behaviors of the struggling avatar and behaviors of the future-paced hero, and it's behaviors they're either doing or not doing, we can create even more demand. So again, remember what I was talking about. If someone has an identity they want and their behavior is matching up to that identity, it creates a lot of self-esteem. But if we do the opposite, it creates them to want to move away from that identity. So if I start describing the struggling avatar, the unheard entrepreneur, and the behaviors of the struggling avatar, the behaviors of the unheard entrepreneur, and they start to recognize I'm doing those behaviors of this unwanted identity, it causes them to want to move. Now, when people become the new generation entrepreneur, like let's say they're in your program and you want them to feel good and have great self-esteem and to know that they are becoming that identity, well, start using those behaviors. Hey guys, thanks for joining the 4X program. I want you all to become new generation entrepreneurs and I want you to become 4Xers. Here's some of the things that the top 4Xers are doing. Here's the behaviors they have. Well, it creates a demand and desire and a roadmap for them to start changing their behaviors, which actually creates bigger transformations. When your audience and your students change their behaviors that are keeping them stuck, they start to see transformations a lot faster. So incorporating the behaviors and being clear on the behaviors is incredibly powerful when we talk about identities. So two things just to wrap up this episode. Number one, your identity needs to become, the brand can become an identity to create loyal audience in the long term. But when it comes to marketing and messaging, if we can create two different identities, the struggling avatar, the future-paced hero, give them names, make the struggling avatar based on an older version of you, you start talking about the behaviors and the thoughts and the feelings that that person has so they can self-identify, this is where I am, but I don't want to be here. And then you start to create the future-paced hero, which is all about who they want to desire or who they desire to be. And then you attach behaviors and feelings and thoughts and situations that the future-paced hero does. Once they join your program, you can actually reinforce their behaviors and you can raise their self-esteem higher because you're changing their behaviors that now match the future-paced hero. So to keep it really simple, create two different identities inside of your brand that will start to create demand. Now, I know we have a workshop coming up on this pretty soon. So what I want you guys to do is to go to brandonlucero.com/workshop. It's brandonlucero.com/workshop, where I'm going to dive deeper into how to create those two different identities within your brand and how to use them. Now, it's a lot simpler than you may think, but all you need to do is go to brandonlucero.com/workshop depending on when you're listening to this episode. So you may be listening to this episode and it may be over already, but hopefully most of you are listening in time to get onto that workshop. So just head over to brandonluciero.com/workshop. And if you haven't done so already and you find this podcast valuable, I would so appreciate a positive review on iTunes. So head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.